I love when you all pick out particular songs that speak to this conversation that we're in. Today, sadly, is the last installment of an introduction to love. And to be clear with you all, it was only supposed to be an introduction, all right? And I know we're probably, 13, 14 in, but Paul just writes such beautiful literary masterpiece that we couldn't rush it. And so thank you all for leaning in with me on this conversation. Today I want to finish it. So let's go. I want to read I'm going to open by reading the entire chapter of 13 in 1 Corinthians. And then I want to close today by reading Eugene Peterson's version of it as well. All right. Eugene Peterson wrote what most of you probably know as The Message. But he's a fantastic scholar and got just the way he gave language to some of these ideas is so beautiful. So we'll close that way. All right. So let me pick up and read what Paul is writing here, and then we'll just kind of give the very end. Paul gives us an image. All I want to do is hand you that image that Paul hands us, and then tell you in what ways it's kind of moved me, and then hopefully it will move us, not just you individually, but us as a collective as well. All right. So this is 1 Corinthians 13, verse 1. If I speak in the tongues of humans and of angels, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Do you know any noisy gongs or clanging cymbals? And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. If I give away all my possessions, if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love is not envious or boastful or arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable. It keeps no record of wrongs. It does not rejoice in wrongdoing, but rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But as for prophecies, they will come to an end. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will come to an end. Why? Because we only know in part, and we prophesy only in part. But when the complete comes, the partial will come to an end. Let me remind you, when I was a child, I spoke as a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became an adult, I put an end to childish ways. For now, we see only a reflection, as in a mirror. But then, we will see face to face. Now, I know only in part. Then, I will know fully, even as I have been fully known. And now, faith, hope, and love remain. These three. And the greatest of these is love. Now, most people stop there. The problem is the insertion of chapter and numbers are a modern invention. So when Paul wrote this, he didn't have closed chapter 13, all right? It was one giant letter. We're the ones who divided it. So the letter doesn't stop there. In fact, if you flip over to 14, verse 1, I think he ends after these two phrases. So he says, and now faith, hope, and love remain, these three, and the greatest of these is love. Chapter 14, verse 1, two words, pursue love. Pursue love. All right, I want to hand you this image that Paul gives us, and we'll kind of work through where this takes us today, all right? Paul gives us an image of a mirror. He says this, for now we see only a reflection, as in a mirror, but then we will see face to face. Now, a couple thoughts about this. The mirrors of the ancient world were not the mirrors that you know today, all right? I love a good mirror, all right? Just recently, my wife and I redid our bathroom and our bedroom, and oh my God, we have light now. Do you know what I'm talking about? And it's not that we didn't have it before, but it was just kind of the way the house was when we bought it, and they weren't very bright lights, but now we have like daylight light, you know what I'm talking about? And then Katie bought these mirrors that when I stand in front of the sink, it has like this built-in light in the mirror. So we have the lights, which are on top, but then you have the light, and when you hit that switch, honestly, it's more than I want to see. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because sometimes when it's darker, I'm like, look at me, like, it's not bad. Straight out of bed. You know what I mean? I'm like, that's not bad. Like my wife gets to look at this. That's not terrible, right? And then she'll flip that switch, and I'm like, my God, my wife looks at this, right? Like it's rough. You know what I'm talking about? And what's so amazing is these mirrors, like they're unbelievable. And I will lean into them because here's what you need to know, all right? I stand in front of people, and there's a camera, and so particularly on Saturday nights, Katie always laughs at me. Because we'll finish whatever we're doing, and then she'll sit down on the couch. She's like, so what do you want to do? And usually, like, we have these list of things that we watch on Saturday nights. I'm trying to, I have a very strategic, like, rhythm in my life, and I like to really rest. I don't do things on Saturday nights with people, usually, because I got to get my mind right about what I'm about to do the next day, and I don't want my body worn out, and so usually I'm just kind of, like, hanging out and just chilling and doing whatever doesn't require brain power. And so that happens. Katie will get down and is like, what do you want to watch? I was like, I don't know, but I'm going to take a shower, do my thing. Katie's like, I'll see you in 4 hours, all right? Do you know why? This may shock you. It's because I'm standing in front of a mirror looking at every detail of my face going, I got to get this stuff in order, all right? Like, I'm going to be standing in front of people, like people are watching, like, we got to take care of business. And this mirror that we have now, I cannot begin to tell you how amazing this mirror is. And then if that isn't good enough, you know what we also have? We have one of those up-close mirrors. Do you know what I'm talking about? That sit on the wall that you pull over if that mirror isn't doing a good job. And if you want to see something frightening, put that thing in front of your face and look at it like looking through a microscope, because you can see everything you don't want to see, all right? Like, I'm talking all these details. I'm like, wow, unbelievable. Now, I say all that to tell you, our mirrors right now are not the mirrors that Paul would have been referencing in the first century. When Paul uses an illustration of a reflection in a mirror, he wasn't thinking about the mirror you have in your house. But here's what is amazing. There were mirrors in the first century, and guess where the mirrors were made in the first century? You're right, the city of Corinth. Who is Paul writing to? The collective at Corinth. What is Paul doing? He has been on a literary masterpiece. Now listen, I've said this, I'm going to say it again in defense of Paul. I got a lot of beef with Paul, all right? I don't like Paul, to be honest with you, in many ways. And there are many of you who have deconstructed your faith, and you're here, and the one person you don't like in the Bible is Paul. Now, I have said this 1,000 times, but to his defense, just in case we all die, and sure enough, Paul's the first one there waiting on me, all right? I want to just say this in his defense. Most of the things we give to Paul and don't like about Paul were never written by Paul. There are only 7 undisputed letters of Paul. There were so many letters written in the name of Paul that were not Paul, okay? But Paul, he gets a lot of beef, all right? And I understand there are some things that are shady, all right, that Paul writes. Now, I also want to say to you, we live in 2024. That's called evolution. It's the evolution of consciousness, all right? So if it sounds like Paul's a bit misogynistic, it's because he lived in a culture where that was misogynistic, all right? And what you have are glimmers of even Paul as he grows. All of that said, if Paul never wrote anything else but 1 Corinthians chapter 13, he is worthy of having conversation about. Because there is not a writing in the biblical narrative, in my opinion, more profound than what we've just read in 1 Corinthians 13. And so what Paul does is, to the best of his ability, remember, he's not talking about flowers and hearts kind of love. That's eros. He's talking about agape. He's talking about specifically a kind of love that is ineffable and indescribable. And his hope is that in the midst of this turmoil that's happening in Corinth, because they're fighting about every theological issue imaginable, no one can agree on anything. The church is only 5 years old. And Paul just steps in and he's like, I got to write this letter to you. I need you to understand something. Like, you can have the best theology in the world, but if you do not have love underneath that theology, it is worthless. I don't care how correct you think you are. If you lack love, it's pointless. And so he does his best to help us see, taste, experience, cognitively understand, but bodily experience what this love is. And I've told you, I've had maybe 2 encounters in my life of what I think is what I would call perfect love. And those 2 encounters were transcendent. And to even try to explain them to you, I'm not just baffling you here, even try to explain them to you in some ways kind of like ruins the experience for me. I can only tell you when I've felt like I've been in the presence of actual love, I can only tell you that what Paul is saying is pretty close to me. That it was patient, it was kind, it did not keep a record of wrongs, there was zero judgment. It was the most blissful experience of my life, and all I can say is that it was the presence of love. And Paul's like, I'm going to end this thing. How do I do it? And it's as if he's like writing to Corinth, and he knows the factory, and he's like, what can I say? I got it. Because half these people in the collective, they work at the brass shop. And in the first century, he knew that most of these people in the collective were making mirrors. And so Paul's like, yeah, that's it. That's it. Let me illustrate with this mirror. Now, brass making was the major industry in Corinth. Brass mirrors were manufactured by people in this city and specifically in this collective. And what would happen is people would gaze at themselves in these brass mirrors. And these brass mirrors were like polished brass mirrors. It's not that Paul is castigating mirror making, all right? But he's trying to contextualize his message. Paul uses their trade, their work, their manufacturing to help them literally and metaphorically see better. Paul is trying to open their eyes to the love he is talking about. Paul is trying to help them have an awakening experience where they can see like they've never seen before. And then what Paul chooses to do to help them see better is he gives them this illustration of a mirror. Now, I want to show you this. This is what scholarship would say was a mirror in the first century, okay? So think about that image to the right there, would be to your left. If you flipped it open, you can kind of see the image to the right, how it would look, okay? So a couple thoughts here. Obviously, this is sitting in a museum somewhere, so you get the feel, but the best they had basically were like brass mirrors, and they would polish these brass mirrors so much, and that would be what they actually saw as the reflection. So you can imagine if you just had like a polished brass, the best you get, because you can't see detail, but the best you get is like maybe a little bit of form, maybe a little bit of a reflection, and that's what Paul is getting at here. This is why he moves on from this moment, all right? Now hold this image, and he's like, okay, this is what I'm trying to tell you, all right? And Paul didn't have what we have today. Now imagine this for a minute, okay? Brass, now this, all right? First of all, that's so dirty, but you get the idea, all right? All right? First of all, just take a look, because that's what I'm looking at. So if you don't like it, you get the point. All right, so this is kind of like what we're looking at right here, although this would be considered like a modern invention, all right? So these people would take, like, imagine just brass, and they would look in there, and that's the best image that they have. Here's what Paul is getting at, okay? Paul is saying this: yes, a mirror only partially tells the tale of what we look like. It's blurry, it's indirect, it's obscure, and the quality of seeing in a mirror is not very good, especially mirrors in the first century. So Paul is saying this is about the difference between seeing a reflection in the mirror versus seeing it face to face. I know what you know about this, and you and I know it, and if I were writing this letter in 2024, I wouldn't use a mirror illustration. I'd probably use Zoom illustration. So if Paul were writing this letter now, he'd be like, you know what it's like? It's like you being on a Zoom and seeing someone versus being in their presence and actually seeing someone. Now, let me say this. Thank God for Zoom. Thank God for FaceTime, especially during COVID. What a monumental leap that was for all of us, all right? It's amazing. It really is an amazing invention that I can sit in my living room and talk to anybody, anywhere across the globe. It's quite astonishing. I also love, my favorite thing is how we have become as human beings. That we have forgotten about the miracle of all of this, and I am the guy that's on a call with someone from Kenya, which is, best of my knowledge, a few miles away from us. And all of a sudden, the Zoom call gets dropped, and what do? Get angry. How dare? What kind of internet, what kind of system is this, right? Okay, first of all, that's like looking at the resurrection of Jesus and actually watching him coming out of the grave and be like, it was all right. I am extremely grateful, and especially when my wife is away traveling or when I'm away traveling. God, is there anything more amazing? I don't just have to sit on a line on a phone and hear her voice. Oh my God, I am old enough to remember before FaceTime. You know what I'm talking about? I am old enough to tell you that when Katie and I first started dating, I was 18 years old. I lived in my parents' house at 18. I was just starting college, so I would drive. I didn't stay on campus because campus was a little too secular for my people, all right? And they were worried about their son that he might grow up and get liberal and start sinning. Turns out they were right, all right? But it happened a little later, all right? And so before I went off to college, they were like, well, we got an idea. Why don't you go to this college, which is close to the house, so then you can stay here, and you can just drive back and forth. I'm like, that sounds great. And so I had my little bedroom in the back of the house, and then I met Katie for the first time. And Katie and I, this was like, first of all, email was just really getting cooking. We'd be blasting emails out together, but then it was like phone calls. But this was back, you remember these days? Hang on with me. This was back when you had to pay for minutes. Do you know what I'm talking about? Do you remember those days when you didn't know what your cell phone was going to be, but then the bill came in afterwards and you're like, oh my God, it's $1,000? What happened? And my dad, I can still to this moment hear footsteps coming down the hallway, and he had the phone bill going, son, what are you doing? And I'm like, Dad, I'm in love, right? And my dad's like, is that love going to pay for this bill? It will. You have to trust love, Dad. Because here's the thing, Katie, you remember this? I'm telling you, when you get older, you'll appreciate this. And for all of you that are in that stage right now, you're like living in that one-bedroom apartment that's like so tiny and you have dogs and everything. And you're just like, I want to get out of here. Don't rush it. I'm telling you, you will look back one day and go, those were the glory days, right? And I still smile at the fact that Katie and I would get on the phone at night and we would fall asleep talking to each other. But just to be clear, minutes were adding up as we fell asleep talking to each other, because she was in Atlanta, I was in Tennessee, and we would talk for hours. And sometimes we wouldn't even talk. We'd just sit there. It was the closest thing we had. And then now, fast forward, this is amazing. Now it's like when I'm away or when she's away, we don't even call anymore. It's like, and she's the only one that can do this. First of all, if I see any of you all pop on my cell phone and it says FaceTime, I'm like, decline, all right? Is there anything more rude than that? You did not ask permission to come into my space. FaceTiming, all right? Like, do you know, it's clear you have experienced that, but it's like, wait, first of all, send a text first, all right? Like, hey, heads up, I'm going to FaceTime. When I see that thing roll in, I'm like, that's disrespect right there, all right? But Katie's the only one that baby rolls in, and I'm like, yeah, let's do it, and I'll hit it, and boom, there she is. There she is. And it is a beautiful thing. Beautiful. And sometimes when I'm away, like my heart, I'm like, God, it's good to see you. See you. Before all of that, it was just like you could talk to her and then you could look at a photo. I mean, I remember growing up, all men had in their wallets were pictures of their family. You remember that? But first of all, is this what happens when you get old? You just stand up and reminisce on the days? So you're like, good God, man, you're 43. You're not old. Move on with your life, all right? I can't. I'm having a hard time, all right? But I remember, like, you remember and some of y'all still have it, which hats off to you people. If you still have, I'm just curious, how many of you have pictures of your family in your wallet? Does anybody in here have that? Okay, all right. So you're like, absolutely not, all right? But But it's like, why would you? You have a cell phone. But I remember, they would just flip through, like, take a look. Here's my here's my wife. What a beautiful thing. And then you move on, technology transcends, now we have Facebook. It's all great. All I'm telling you is if Paul was here, he'd be like, oh, that stuff's wonderful. But I want to tell you something. Hear me out. There is still a difference between being on a Zoom with my wife and being in the presence of my wife. There is still a difference. I know this because I can't tell you how many emails we get from people often. This week, I got one from Australia of people who watch online. They are a part of the Vinings Lake Collective from Australia. In my mind, I was like, surely there's a community a little bit closer, but nonetheless, Australia, they're watching online, all right? And then, even further out, a foreign country called Cumming, Georgia. You ever heard of this place? Got an email from someone in Cumming. They're like, it's just a little bit too far to drive, all right? And I'm like, is it? Because I can introduce you to some folks that drive a long ways to be here on a Sunday morning, all right? I know some of you. This is why we are non-judgmental here. When you roll in at 11:40, we get it, all right? We're just like, you made it. We're glad you're here, but we are dismissed, all right? And so I get it. But you know what all of them would tell you? And I'm telling you, our team knows this. All of them ask the same question. Is there an in-person community like Vinings Lake close to me? And we've created this search engine. Zorza Creative nailed it. We created this search engine where we've got links to all of these, like 3 or 4 different search engines that can help you find a church that might be like ours. And the reason we say that is because as amazing as Zoom is, as amazing as YouTube is, as amazing as Instagram is, as amazing as these online platforms are, I'm telling you, you cannot substitute an in-the-room, in-person, flesh and blood experience, right? You know this. It's true. Because there's something about the energy that's actually in the room that's swirling about. And there's something about the fact that I can reach up and actually touch. It's tactile. It's here. This is what Paul is getting at. This is the illustration he's trying to use. What he's saying is we see the divine indirectly. We see love indirectly. We experience love indirectly. It's not complete. What we know of love, it's not that it's inaccurate, it's just incomplete. And what he says is, our job, your job as a collective, is to give the world the clearest reflection of love that you can possibly give them. What if at VL we gave this city the clearest perspective of love we can possibly give them? Because I want to tell you something. Love has been distorted by brass mirrors, and they need to be polished a little better. And you know this, and I know this because I am alive in 2024, and I watch politics. And there are lots of people that stand up in the name of love that are not giving clear reflections of the essence of love. And this is a part of our task. This is why we keep gathering on Sundays. I told our staff and our team this morning, I was like, you know what we are? We are a school of love. That's what we are. Welcome to class. We want to give you a doctorate degree at the University of Love, okay? We want you to not just know about this love, but to experience it and then become a reflection of it. I don't want to just stand up and talk to you about love for 17 Sundays. I want us to actually go out and integrate this love. This is what Paul is getting at. He's saying for far too long, too little attention has been given in our churches, collectives, and communities to cultivating love. So let us carefully cultivate our energies in learning how to love better. This collective was meant to be a school of love, to learn, to integrate love. Do you know what is interesting? Did you know there's a book in the New Testament that never mentions the word love? I thought that was interesting because when I was studying this, I was like, wonder what book talks the most about love and then what book doesn't mention love. Now, in my scholarly opinion from the University of Emory, I believe the Johannine community who wrote 1 John, 2 John, 3 John, the Johannine community, to me, no one masters the idea of love better than them. They were the ones who wrote that phrase, God is love. What a brilliant, brilliant phrase. But then I started thinking, is there places in the New Testament that doesn't mention love? And here's one that surprised me. Did you know the book of Acts never mentions the word love? That shocks me. Because if you know anything about Acts, that's actually kind of the start of the Jesus movement. So one would think in Acts, the start of the Jesus movement, that they might actually be talking about love, since, check this out, the Jesus movement in its essence was always about love. Love God, love your neighbor, love your enemy, love the outcast, love the marginalized. Yeah, all about love. So I was like kind of perplexed, like why would the origin of this Jesus movement not talk about love? And then I'm telling you, within seconds, I don't get a lot of these epiphany moments. Within seconds, I was like, oh, because I've read that book that Luke wrote called Acts. It occurred to me that the reason they don't talk about love is because they're doing love. It's only until you get to Corinth that they have to sit around and talk about what love is to redefine it. Because in the book of Acts, they're so busy loving people, they're not even gathering to talk about the fact that they need to be loving people. Come on now. Anybody with me on this, right? Because when you read Acts, this is what you see. They're not sitting around arguing like, well, I'll tell you what, let's define what love is. No, they're just doing it. They are bringing love. They're trying their best to be as clear of a reflection of love as they can possibly be. And this is what Paul is getting at. And this is my hope for us, that we would be a reflection of love. Our present experience of love, as great as it is, cannot compare to the real thing. We get but a taste of love now, but Paul says soon we will be satisfied. Soon love will be amplified and purified in its fullest quality. It's what I love about my phone. I got this iPhone. I love it. But over the evolution of it, you can go back and look at the camera. And I don't know anything about cameras, so just hang with me, all right? But I can tell you the one thing I know is there's a button up in the top right of my phone, and when I go to snap a picture, it has HD 30, HD 60, but then, and here it is, 4K. Do you know what I'm talking about? And every time, I don't even know how this works, if it translates, but I'm like, why would we even have it? Let's go to 4K, right? 4K those images. Boom, 4K those videos, right? This is what we have. And then I'll go back and look at old photos in my phone, and Katie and I just weep sometimes like, God, because I remember growing up and looking back thinking, man, old shows that my parents just watched, they look so old. And then I'll see a rerun of like a football or basketball game from like the 90s, and I'm like, oh my God, that looks so old. And it's interesting how clear technology has become over the years. And it just keeps getting better and better and better and better. Yes, this is what Paul is getting at. He is saying we only see with a dim reflection, but just as that mirror, polished brass, has evolved over time. God, I love this image. So it is with us. It's like it keeps getting sharper and sharper and sharper and sharper. And Cody, are you telling me that one day it will be as clear can be? Yes, I believe that's where it's headed. Desjardins called it the omega point, that we are all heading somewhere. One writer said it like this, that Dr. King Jr. actually said this because he was quoting someone who said, the moral arc of the universe bends toward justice. It might be long, but the idea is that it is all heading somewhere. And I've told you this, and I hope you believe it. I do believe love wins in more ways than we could ever imagine. But the way love wins is because over time, we are all getting a little more clear, a little more clear, a little more clear. You could also call it the rising of consciousness. And the more awake and the more aware we become, the closer we're getting to the source and sustainer of all that is love. And so the question is, how can we become the clearest reflection of love possible? Now, I didn't mention anything last week, and that was a mistake. So I want to make sure I say it this week, and from every Sunday forward, I want to make sure I say this. If you weren't here 2 weeks ago, I am now an author, all right? Now, I want to say something to you, and I warned you ahead of time. If you were not here, I just signed a book deal, all right? And I told you that you're going to hear about it every single Sunday. And I failed last week, but it starts today, okay? I cannot tell you how excited I am about all of this. Now, I want you to know something about this process. I'm brand new to it. I signed a book contract. I've had some writing in me for a couple years, 2 or 3 years, and it started taking shape over time. And about 2 weeks ago, I signed a contract. Well, check this out. It was moving at such a snail's pace, and now it's moving at a very rapid pace, okay? And here's what's so amazing. I just last week turned in my full manuscript, all right? Now, that is a feat for me, all right? This thing was roughly about 150, 60,000 words, and they asked me to get it down to about 60,000 words. Do you know what that's like? That's like them showing up on a Sunday going, we're going to need about a 15-minute talk. Like, oh, so you want the introduction, right? So we had to whittle this thing down. Well, I have to tell you this because I am nerding out right now. I mean, high level of nerdness here. I love my editor, all right? And that was why I picked this publisher. And the other reason is because no one else wanted me. But because they were like, he's too progressive. And then my favorite was the big New York houses. They were like, I think I've told you this, but they were like, this guy, he's way too like spiritual Christian Jesus-y, the big New York houses. But then the Christian houses were like, this guy is so not Jesus enough, Christian enough, spiritual enough. And I'm like, somebody's out there. And sure enough, there's a publisher in Grand Rapids. They're called Erdman's. Have you ever heard of Erdman's? Come on now. Yes. Erdman's was like, this? Where's this been at? All right. No. And then they send me the editor, and the editor, we got on a Zoom, and I fell in love with this editor. I'm like, because I talked to a few folks, and I'm like, no, this one, she gets it. All right. And so you really have to build a good relationship with your editor because she's the one who determines how this book's going to flow. And so I've been bouncing emails and on phone calls with my editor. Well, we turned in the script, all right? And here's what she did. I was waiting on pins and needles. There is a very, how do I say it, anxious feeling when you don't know what you've had because only 3 people read it, but then you submit it to the editor, and then you're waiting on the first response, all right? Well, she sends the first response back. Can I just indulge you for a minute? And let me just read this to you. Here's what she said, okay? She said, hi, Cody. Something I've learned in my last couple of years back in book publishing is that there is often a significant quality gap between the proposal and the manuscript I eventually receive. People work over their proposal for months, if not years. And then I get the manuscript, and it needs a lot more work than I expected. She said, all a part of the job, but sometimes it's a rough reality check. Now, I read that, and I was going, oh, God. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because I think she's about to come down on me. Like, all that to say, your manuscript was 40 times worse than your proposal. Find a new job, all right? She says this, then she turns it, right? Which is just to say, it's a real pleasure when a manuscript comes in and its quality exceeds its proposal. I know. Cody, God, this is so narcissistic. I know. I want you to know, I know it's like a douchebag story. I'm doing this intentionally, all right? So I'm in on the joke with you, all right? And by the way, I say all this not because I'm up here like, look at me. Just so we're clear, we all wrote this book. You know what I'm talking about, right? Especially when you read it, you'll know, oh my God, I did help write this book. You did. That's all the information I'm giving you. You'll have to buy it, okay? Now, she went on to say, you've achieved that here. Bravo and thank you. And then she said this, I'm really moved by your journey in the book, Cody. Like the eventual readers, this is not my story, but I see my story inside of your story. And I'm grateful for the witness and encouragement you provide. And as your publisher, I'm excited that we've got something special on our hands here. This is going to be meaningful to so many people. What a wonderful pouring out indeed. You'll find my comments and suggestions in the attached file. It's all pretty simple stuff, and I wouldn't be surprised if you can knock it out in a day or two. But also, I invite pushback. If there's anything here that you think goes against the grain of your style or argument, take a look and let me know if you have any initial questions. And then she says this, let's get this thing as clear as we possibly can. Come on, nothing lights this guy up more than when someone tells me we can write it better, say it better, make it clearer. All I'm saying to you is, that is what we are doing here together. We are all writing a book. We are. You can call it whatever you want to. You're writing a book about your life. You're writing a book about your life. Your family's a part of that book. I don't know what chapter. You're going to come to the end of your life, and hear me out. There are going to be people who read a section from a book that's not your book. But then there are going to be people who take your life's book and they read it. And here's the thing. Everything you write is the way you live. And they'll read it, and the question at the end of the day when they're reading the book of your life is this: is it as clear as it can be a reflection of love? That's it. That's it. And I want that to be true for us. Let's get it as clear as we can. I want to close here, and then I want to read something. You guys good? This has really been fun. By the way, thank y'all for putting up for my absolute nonsense. I realize it's ridiculous. Katie sometimes leaves. She's like, God, how are you a pastor? I'm like, I know. It really is a joke. It's a joke, all right? I want to share this, and then I want to read something. Talk about clarity of love. There are 3 projects that we've been wanting to do around Bindings Lake. Because some things need polishing, right? One is, there are the things called soffits, which are around the building. And if you don't know what that is, it's the things that hang underneath the building, where ours are kind of coming down and they need it. So we had to get a quote and all that stuff. And that's just things that I don't overly love spending money on as a collective, because I'm like there are better things to do. You know what I'm talking about? But also, I also want to be clear that we were given this space and it's ours. And whenever we die and go, I hope we can pass it on in better condition than how we had it. And I know a lot of progressive churches right now that sold their buildings, and they regret selling their buildings. They sold their buildings, and now they're meeting and moving around. By the way, what if I told you we were going to sell a building, we're going to move around, but then every Sunday I was like, we're here this Sunday and here this next Sunday. Just to be clear, you're probably like me, like, I'm good. You know what I'm talking about? There's something really special about actually having our own space. Also, all of our volunteers know this. We don't have to set up anything every Sunday morning, right? Isn't that lovely? You ever been a part of like a church startup where they roll in the video screens? You got to be there at 3 a.m. Oh, that's not church. That's hell. All right. So I love our space. And in 2005, when we ran across New Hope Baptist and they gave us this building, when they entrusted this building to us, I'm telling you, we took it very serious. Yep. We are going to polish this thing and make it the actual structure, an actual reflection of love. And so that requires some things. Over the next coming weeks, you're going to hear me. We're talking some big dollars, because it's going to take some money to get this thing tightened up in tender love and care. All right, we got to get this thing going. One of the projects, there were 3 of them. One of them was we need to help. Our kids' building was struggling a little bit. All right, now that's not a knock on anybody, but we tried to have a volunteer day. And I want to emphasize, tried to have a volunteer day, and we were like, let's get the painting back there, all right? And I don't know if y'all know this, but you have professional painters, then you have volunteer painters, right? And volunteer painters have good hearts. You know what I'm talking about? So we just really didn't get the job done very well. So I was like, well, let's just bring in somebody. We'll get it done right, because I want you to know we take very serious all of our areas. And even though we've got this thing running in here, we've got to make sure Lauren and the kids' building are just going, right? Like, we need them to have the best they can possibly have. And Rachel, and then the students back here with Shakira and Milton, we know all these areas weigh on me at night, because I'm like, we got to get them to the best of their ability in their space, right? So I was like, we're going to bring in somebody. So it was very simple. I'm like, let's hire a crew. They'll come in, they'll paint. That was it. No big deal, right? Just paint the kids' building. So they show up, and on Sunday last week, they text me and they said, can you just get the room ready, pull things off the walls? I can do that. I got volunteers. So when I was standing back here greeting people, first-time guests, I was also looking at some of you walking out going, hey, can you help us back here, right? So, yeah, I can help. So we pull things off the wall. Well, there was a decal on the wall. It said VL students. You remember that, right? Well, I roll in, and they're like, does that need to be off? So I was like, yeah, but don't worry about it. I'll grab it. So I ripped the decal off. When I ripped the decal off, the wall came down. The actual drywall just came down, and I was like, okay, what just happened? And turns out that entire wall was soaking wet. All right? Yeah, I know. I promise you your kids are not going to die of mold. I promise you. Just hang with me, all right? I was like, and then that inner voice said, this is why, Cody, you don't do projects. Because there's never a simple project in your world. All projects are larger than you think, right? It's just a paint job. Oh, no, you think it's a paint job. Well, the wall comes down, we open it up, and oh my God. First of all, I didn't even know this, but apparently when they built this building in 1964, someone had a full-on chimney in the kids' room, and they had a big fireplace, and they would light that baby up and have themselves kumbaya moments, apparently, inside. Books and bonfire was happening long before we ever came along, all right? This is the wall, and that apparently is a chimney, all right? Now, if you look inside that chimney, you'll notice the chimney, the bricks fell into the chimney, and somewhere along the way, and this is a non-judgmental / judgmental observance, somebody said, you know what? Let's just cover it up. Let's just put some drywall over it, and no one will ever know. To which I stood there going, oh my God. We started this place in 2005. It's 2024. We haven't stopped. To date, this building keeps surprising me. And I'll tell you what, I had 1,000 metaphors that I could have used for this one image. One of which is, friends, we're still deconstructing, both literally and figuratively. And we were handed a faith that looks a little bit like this. And then all of a sudden, just like a good fundamentalist church, they were like, you know what? If we just hide it behind the wall of the church, no one will ever know. Wrong. We believe in church clarity here, all right? Do not tell me you welcome everyone when you won't baptize a queer person, all right? Did you see how fast I went from chimney to queer? Did you see that, all right? Oh, we're having too much fun today. We got to get out of here before we lose it, all right? No. I appreciate the effort of love. I think the church before us did the best they could. Perhaps with what they had, they evolved. But they're not here anymore. We're here. I want to remind you, the generation before us is gone. Everyone has died. Everyone will die. We are here, and at best, we've got 100 years. And turns out, we didn't get to pick who we do class with. I didn't get to pick. You all were born at the same time, roughly around when I was. We're all doing the school of love together, okay? And we're here now, and we got to ask some questions. Do we want a fireplace hidden behind a drywall? I'm just going to tell you, as the leader of the thing that you all asked me to lead, no, all right? I would actually prefer no mold. I'd prefer our kids to breathe in fresh air, and I'd prefer everyone in our space actually have a space that represents not just a facade, but actual integrity. Do you know what I'm talking about? Where the bones in the structure aren't hidden somewhere, but they actually have substance to them. God, I could preach on this wall all day. And so, we put the drywall up. I don't have an after photo, but I'll just tell you this. You march yourself right back to that back building the moment I get finished and just breathe that in. Now, I'm going to say something too. There are kids back there, so if security, they're checking you out, don't you worry. You just tell them, I'm here to see the wall. They will let you in, all right? No. I mentioned that to you because it's like, yep, you may look at that and be like, that's just paint. No, that's polishing the brass mirror. You understand that? Polishing the brass mirror. So fast forward and we're done, all right? Then I'm like, we got this room tip-top. Only thing we need is lights. Only thing we need is lights. I call my friend Tony. I call Jonathan. You know Rachel? Jonathan's Rachel's husband, and Tony. Tony runs. He volunteer leads. God help him. He is the lead volunteer of facilities. Did you hear that? All right? So some of you here, and you're like, I'm going to volunteer. I can assure you, Tony would welcome you with open arms, all right? So I called the lead volunteer, and I said, Tony, we've got this room. Can't even begin to tell you. There was a chimney back there. The chimney, they left it open. Water was coming down through the chimney. So we were just trying to paint, had to get a guy up on the roof, had to cement the chimney in. Hadn't been looked at since 1964, all right? Got it all done. I said, all we need now, got about 4 fluorescent lights. Just need to change the bulb. That's it. Very easy. Tony's like, I got that. I meet Tony up here, open the door, pops it open. He gets up on the ladder. Jonathan flips the switch. He's like, He pulls out the old one, sets in the new light. Should be good as gold. Flips it, doesn't turn on. Of course it doesn't turn on. Well, it seems like we have a power problem. Do we? 1964. Do we have a power problem? And then Tony tells me, I have an idea. And I'm like, okay, let's hear it. He's like, I think it's, and here's his words, the ballast. All right? Now, I didn't even know what that is. Still don't really know what it is. But all I know is this man gets up on a ladder and he takes some black magical box off the fluorescent lights. And then he moves over. Oh, by the way, as he takes it off, I watch him grab cutters and he cuts a wire. In my mind, and I said this to him, Tony, before you do that, are you sure? Is this the right move? And Tony, in all of his confidence, is like, I'm not sure of anything in this room, all right? Let's give it a shot. So he does it. Then he hooks it up, and he connects it. And then I roll over, and Jonathan's like, get down from the ladder, Tony, because we don't know what's about to happen. He flips the switch. Nothing happens. So then Jonathan says, oh, it must be the hardwire power that runs through all the lights. You're going to have to get an electrician. I just want to change the bulb. Now I need an electrician. And Tony says, he's standing there and he looks, he says, I made a mistake. Oh, you made a mistake? He said, yeah. And he gets up there and he's laughing at himself. He said, I hooked the wire up to the old wire, not the new wire. And I'm still like, I don't even understand what you're saying. He's like, just hold. Flip the switch. They work. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know how to tell you this. All the lights in the kids' building are on, they work, and check this out, they have not worked since 2005. Yeah. And that may not seem like anything to you, but can I tell you how good I slept last night? Knowing all the lights are on, because if you're like me, isn't it the little things that keep you up at night going, it's fluorescent lights in a kid's building. But we also know it's more than fluorescent lights in a kid's building, right? Yeah. I'm using all those as illustrations to just tell you this. It takes hard work to be a reflection of love. And there are some attractive, sexy parts of it. Did you know why he was up there fixing the lights? I'm just going to share this with you and I'm done. And I'm not going to say anything else about it. I got an email the moment he was up fixing the lights from USA Today. USA Today. And they email me and says, Cody, we've heard about your spiritual collective in Mableton, Georgia. USA Today. And I was like, how? And he says, we're doing... Tony said the electrician. He said, they said the electrician called him. And this man on the other end says, we're doing a whole feature article, USA Today, and we want to interview you about your spiritual collective. And I just told Katie, I just laughed. I said, no one will ever know. You're doing interviews for the AJC, you're doing interviews for the Washington Post, for religious news services, and for USA Today. And here's where it gets real raw and truthful. While we're just trying to fix a fluorescent light as a volunteer team in the building. I'm telling you, that is life. Sometimes on the outside, I have pastors like, God, it looks like y'all are just crushing it. Yeah, we really got the string of lights working this week. Like, we are booming right now, all right? Like that was the task, and we got it done. I'm just telling you, that is the real world. And it can sometimes on Instagram appear like things are moving. But guess what? Somebody's got to change the light bulb. Shane Claiborne said it so well. We all want a revolution, but no one wants to wash the dishes. So how about I close and I'll just read Eugene Peterson's version and we're done with this. Here's how he writes 1 Corinthians 13. Listen to this. Isn't this great? If I speak with human eloquence and angelic ecstasy, but don't love, I am nothing but the creaking of a rusty gate. What an image. If I speak God's word with power, revealing all his mysteries and making everything plain as day, and if I have faith that says to a mountain, jump, and it jumps, but I don't have love, I am nothing. If I give everything I own to the poor and even to the sake to be burned as a martyr, but I don't love, I've gotten nowhere. So no matter what I say, what I believe, and what I do, I'm bankrupt without love. Love never gives up. Love cares more for others than for self. Love doesn't want what it doesn't have. Love doesn't strut. Love doesn't have a swelled head. Doesn't force itself on others. Isn't always me first. Doesn't fly off the handle. Doesn't keep score of the sins of others. Doesn't revel when others grovel. Takes pleasure in the flowering of truth. Puts up with anything. Trusts God always. Always looks for the best. Never looks back, but keeps going to the end. Love never dies. Inspired speech will be over someday. Praying in tongues will end. Understanding will reach its limit. But know only a portion of the truth, and what we say about God is always incomplete. But when the complete arrives, our incompleteness will be canceled. When I was an infant at my mother's breast, I gurgled and cooed like an infant. When I grew up, I left those infant ways for good. We don't yet see things clearly. We're squinting in a fog, peering through a mist. But it won't be long before the weather clears and the sun shines bright. We'll see it all then. See it all as clearly as God sees us, knowing him directly just as he knows us. But for right now, until that completeness, we have 3 things to do to lead us toward that consummation. Trust steadily in God, hope unswervingly, love extravagantly. And the best of the 3 is love. Bindings Lake, I hope this week you help me, and together we polish the reflection of love to the clearest possible way it can be.